Well, welcome back to another episode of the Addy Hour. It's my pleasure to continue to host these conversations. I've definitely been appreciative of the engagement of all of you as listeners. And today I'm very excited to be able to host a conversation on justice, activism, and the church with Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III. Dr. Moss, thanks so much for being here on the Addy Hour podcast.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And we have had the opportunity to interact previously. Dr. Moss and I were part of a provocative panel back in September of 22 entitled, "Is Christianity Bad for Your Mental Health?" So you can just imagine some of the conversations that came up there, but really excited to be able to interact again in this way. And just by way of introduction, for those who may not be familiar with Dr. Moss, want to just let you know that he is the senior pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago, Illinois. He is a preacher, an activist, and an author. And also, over the last 2 decades, he's someone who has practiced and preached a Black theology that unapologetically calls attentions to the problems of mass incarceration, environmental justice, and economic inequality. He is a native of Cleveland, Ohio, an honors graduate of Morehouse College. He also has a master's of divinity from the Yale Divinity School, so home turf in a sense for me, and a doctorate of ministry from Chicago Theological Seminary. He is currently a professor at the McAfee School of Theology at Mercer University. And he is someone who is a third-generation warrior for civil and human rights. He's committed to preaching a prophetic message of love and justice, which he believes are inseparable companions that form the foundation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I should also mention this is a legacy for him, both personally and in terms of his family. He's been heavily influenced and has a foundation from his father, Dr. Otis Moss Jr., and also from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whom his father worked with at one point as well. So again, just to give you all just a little bit of insight, I know we'll hear more, but just appreciate the work that you continue to do and your willingness to be here for this podcast conversation.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Excellent. And as my listeners know, one of the benefits of these conversations is we have a lot of guests who are just generous with their openness and being willing to peel back the layers, as it were. So I wanted to just do a check-in and see how you're doing at this point in time with everything that we're experiencing as a society, and especially soberingly with just all of the challenges around gun violence, both the mass shootings that seem to be happening on a weekly basis and all the other gun violence that does not get that same national attention. So just if you're willing to share how you're doing at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Right now, I am, I use the word okay when you say the scale of 1 to 10. That usually means like 5. So
Yeah.
I'm in the middle. I received a call that one of our deacons actually found his younger brother who had committed suicide by hanging, unfortunately.
Oh, wow.
And he found the body, and
oh my goodness,
just devastating. And right before getting on this podcast, one of our members just sent us a text that she went to the hospital to see her father. Her father was at assisted living place, but they never called her to share that he was being transferred to the hospital. She gets to the hospital, no one had called her, no one said anything, and her father's gone.
Wow.
And the weight of those two people that walking with them as they are preparing for homegoings, both in one, how should I say it? One who had lived a beautiful long life, and then one where you have a family that's with suicide. You raise questions and trying to walk with the family and let them know that this is not punishment. Your loved one is loved by God and God's arm, all of that, without all of the noise and trash that seep into our subconscious because we have such horrific pastoral care and just bad theology and just bad public civic conversation about people who just really are looking for individuals to support them and to walk with them and love them.
Exactly. Well,
so I'm at a 5. I'm at a 5. I'm at a 5.
Yeah.
Just doing what what you do in the Black church is trying to to walk with people in their most vulnerable moments.
Yeah. Well, definitely appreciate your level of honesty just in talking about where you are at this point in time. And I know that a lot of listeners, especially those who have experience or in the Black church, can relate to that piece as well. But some listeners might also even feel surprised to hear you say that you're at a 5 with that level of heaviness that you often have to walk through. But you touched on so many important pieces in terms of meeting people where they're at, but then just all the noise that can come as well. Just to maybe even peel back a little bit more even before we jump into some of the other topics. How do you, as a pastor and a faith leader, navigate that for those that you are ministering to, with all the noise, trying to help them navigate, but then also trying to make sure that it's framed in the right way, both for them, for their families, for the church, for society? I know that's a very large question, but just curious, anything you want to elaborate?
I think on a personal level, it is important that you are grounded in community, your own community. I'm not talking about, quote unquote, just the church community, because for those who are pastors who are probably listening to the most difficult thing is pastors need to be pastored. Pastors need to have community in which they are nurtured and cared so that they can be good caregivers, especially during moments of vulnerability and challenge. And so being in a community, there's your family, and then there are people that are around you that support you. So that's one of the things. And then having the appropriate spiritual practices for yourself. The time of silence, mindfulness, prayer. Music for me has always been very helpful. And as a spiritual practice, listening to and spending time just listening to music that puts you in a particular place, and reading scripture. I'm going through a book right now called the Teaching of Christian Mystics, basically. And so what I do is I read out loud, because reading out loud changes things, number one. Number two, most of what we read that is ancient was never meant to be read in your head. This is oral transmission. So why do we become so modern and say, I'm gonna read this in my head? But when you read out loud, all of a sudden the phrasing, the voice, the pause catches you in a different way than when you read something in your head. I'm encouraging, I teach and I encourage my students to say, before you even go to a scripture and you're going to start trying to work on a sermon, I want you to read it out loud, and to read it out loud in 5 different translations.
Wow.
And watch what happens just by reading. You're not trying to force anything, or just read it. And it becomes a great meditative process and discipline to read out loud, and to read because, for example, I'm sorry I'm talking so long.
No, it's good.
But like if you say the Lord is my shepherd, or do you say the Lord is my shepherd? Or do you say the Lord is my shepherd? Now, all the exact same words, but based on the usage of your voice, a different meaning comes forth, and different emotion is presented. That's why reading out loud, reading poetry out loud, reading scripture out loud, and that's why we sing songs out loud.
Yeah,
like songs in my head. No, you start start singing it. It's one thing to say it in your head, but out, singing it out. Singing, becomes a powerful art form.
Wow, that's so powerful and so good. I know people are listening to that and even just reflecting. I mean, even that simple phrase that you are in 3 different ways, just the power that comes from that. And then you also talked about community, and I know maybe we're getting off script here too, but how do you see those two pieces going together, especially as a pastor? I mean, with things that happen, not just in our congregations, but in the world, and as we navigate them as communities.
I think community is necessary for human flourishing. We're designed as community creatures. We were created in community, to be in community. Genesis talks about humanity being alone. It's not good to be alone. There are times you need to be alone. But we learn in community. We are nurtured in community. We develop in community. And when we experience trauma, we come out of trauma or learn how to navigate trauma through healthy community. And without a healthy community, you are not able to flourish as a human being, and you're not able to reach your full potential. You need to be in a healthy community. And when families are unhealthy, families are community, it takes a toll on your soul, and you have to place yourself in a space where you can be in and around healthy people. And that's one of the aspects of the Black church. I say the Black church specifically, that in a church, there are multiple communities. And when you find the space of the appropriate community, an intergenerational community of elders and younger people who are middle-aged, some who are married, and some who are not, and you have this potpourri of people in your garden are providing aspects for human development. And it's kind of like just like a regular garden. Some people like basil, some people are like mint. So, some people are like rose bushes, but got a whole lot of thorns. So you have to know that they're not all the same, and together they give all of the necessary nutrients spiritually for a person to truly flourish.
That's so wonderful to hear. And my listeners have heard me talk about community in lots of different settings, often bringing up just the biology of what that does in our brains and the social binding. So it's so nice to hear from a holistic perspective, just to hear you actually emphasize and talk about community within the church, how important that is for our soul, and all these different pieces together, and how that really helps us navigate. And then, even as we've talked about things like traumas, as you hinted at, and how people walk through that together as a community, and just the ways that God has designed us to be in community, the ways we can see that show up in our biological changes, the way we can see that in psychological processes, the way we can see that on a global scale. And again, it just seems in so many ways at the heart of what you are doing in your roles, even as I think about what you've talked about in terms of mental health, but also some of the social justice work, thinking about criminal injustices, just the activism and the family history that you have. How does that aspect of community for you, what does that actually look like across all of these different spectrums? Because again, people, might be hearing about and saying, well, you're touching on so many different components, and how do you tie those all together?
That's an interesting question. How do we tie them all together? Well, for me, I was raised in a space that believe that the Black community is varied and diverse, and it is also your responsibility not only to be a part of, but to ensure that this community is thriving. So be a part and thriving. So there's kind of the church, community. There's what I would call, like, for those who've gone to HBCUs, you know, there's another community that develops as a result of that. If you went to a PWI, you've created your own little community, you know, on that level. Then there are the community that you have at your work. Then there's the family community. Then there's the community of friends, friends that you've developed as a child, grew up with, friends that you have connected with during your adulting process, which is some is called college, or if you're, you know, you're in an apprentice program or whatever it may be, or military. And then there are friends that develop as a result of common trauma and tragedy that you end up developing relationships with. And then there are the people that a person that you choose to be your life partner, that I would hope would be your best friend. You know, that you should go down that road. All of those communities make the fullness of who we are, and all of those communities have their North Star, and also have moments where the stars are obscured and they get off course. All of those communities. That's just a part. If you dare to claim to be human and you seek to live your call, you will deal with those issues. But all these aspects of community, though, make up who you are and make up who we see as our wider community. And I'm, you know, speaking, you know, from the perspective of someone who is out of the African American community, and there's some very unique aspects to our community. I mean, just like barbershop community, you know. I mean that I like going to the barbershop, and that community of people, usually brothers, especially when they, you know, start arguing about sports and start lying about other stuff. There's something that's very endearing about being in that space. And there's something stress relieving about being in that space as someone, you know, they're cutting your hair, you know, you get the hookup, you know, with the cut and whatnot, and you get to, you know, to argue or hear a whole bunch of ridiculous theories about the world. There's no other space where people get a chance to communicate, lie, promote.
It's all there.
It's everything. It's everything in those spaces. You know, it's similar to when, you know, people gather together and they play spades or something of that nature. You have that level of energy sometimes, you know, comes about. Yeah.
And some surprises that aren't surprises in terms of the things that come out of people's mouths, but it's healthy too.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating. It's the best comedy in the world is in the barbershop, because you have some of the best storytellers, and they're telling stories that are absolutely not true, and everybody knows it, but we still want to hear the story, no matter what, because they're such a good storyteller.
Yep. I mean, even not to make it too academic all of a sudden, but I know there's a lot of initiatives just even using that space and all the benefits of it to actually help people open up about mental health challenges, because that's that's the first point of contact for a lot of people. So that be able to be equipped in that way to notice something, to touch on it in a space where it's already that sense of community has been really important in a lot of communities, just for really pushing that conversation forward. Yeah,
Chicago, we have a couple of members here who were part of public health initiatives where they were using the barbershop for the public health initiative for, you know, people getting checked, getting tested, all of that, but also for mental health check-in. And now there is an initiative around barbershop books, placing in barbershops books for young people. They can take them, you know, there's no cost to them. You know, they said, hey, you can take it, and you know, it's kind of like read and return. And so there's been this new movement around literacy in connection to barbershops. Literacy and mental health, I think, also go directly together. you give people spaces where they are able to read and to imagine and to rethink and to see themselves in spaces that they never would normally think of themselves. And that's one of the powers, I think, of Afrofuturism.
Yeah.
The idea of seeing Black people in a variety of ways. I read an article years ago. It's called the documentary Impulse in Black Film. And I was kind of like, what is this article? What is this about? And I started reading. I was like, oh, I get it. The writer was saying that for everybody else, when we write something or something is presented, we get to say it's fiction. But for Black people, no matter even if it's just run of the mill, it's like, oh yeah, this is really like a documentary because this is the way Black people are. We don't even get to play. We don't even get to fantasize because we're always told, no, it has to be real. And that's the beauty of Afrofuturism, is that it allows us to expand our imagination. And one of the most dangerous things is to have a colonized imagination that limits your ability to be able to witness what you can be or what your community can be.
Yeah. Well, that's so important. I'm glad you're bringing that up. And this reminds me of a lot of the work that you're already doing, just in terms of Afrofuturism, but then also the power of community to change narratives. I mean, as you're talking about with literacy, as with mental health. And I know you as a church have done a lot of work around that, even from individuals who were formerly incarcerated, and how you've been changing the narrative there as well. So I'd be curious if you'd just be willing to talk about that a little bit for our listeners to hear about some of those innovative things that you're doing to really shift perspective, expectation, and opportunity.
Well, one of the things that we let me just begin this way, that there are 3 pillars to any type of community development work we do here at Trinity. We've done a lot of community development work, and I'll explain a little bit more about community development work. But the 3 pillars are economic development, that in other words, our community must benefit. The second pillar is that it must be sustainable. It must be green. And so there must be some sustainability, must be a green initiative. And then the third pillar is it must disrupt the mass incarceration system. So it has to have those reasons. So we've got to benefit from it. It's got to be green, and it's got to disrupt. So I like to say that it's got to be blessed by Black folk, and Black folk got to be blessed by it. It's got to be green in terms of things that are going to flow into our pockets, into our bank. And it's also got to bind the wounds of the blood been shed as a result of mass incarceration. So I'd like to say it's red, black, and green, to borrow from Marcus Garvey. But what we did with one of our first initiatives, we renovated our church, and we renovated the church green. Green stand. We want to make a LEED certified building. In doing that, we said, 1, the contractors must be Black. 2, those working on this building must be people who come from the mass incarceration system. 3, it has to be green. And this was kind of a challenge because most people who were bidding and things of that nature, we've never done this before. What's going to work with us? This is the way it works. We are the primary contractor. You're a subcontractor. So this is the way we're going to do this. And so we created and built, renovated our church in that manner. And then at one of our next projects, there is a library literally down the street, walking distance from our church. It has the largest collection of African-American literature in the Midwest. It's called the Carter G. Woodson Library, the Vivian Harsh collection. I mean, they have letters of Du Bois sent to people in Chicago. I mean, it's primary resources. If you're doing your PhD at University of Chicago, University of Illinois, DePaul, you have to use this library, but it's in the hood. It's in our hood. We have a great hood, by the way. And so the building had scaffolding around it, not because the city was doing work, but the original contractor did a poor job, and they were worried that the bricks were going to fall on the heads of people walking into the library.
Wow.
And the scaffolding had been out there for 20 years. So people got used to it.
Wow.
Community Development Corporation just raised the question. I was like, why is there scaffolding outside of the building? No one had raised the question. It's like, well, that's when we found the story.
Wow.
And we organized with the community, and when I say organize with the community, other community partners, other organizations, block clubs, you name it. And we found out that the library is heavily used, people love it, but is falling apart. So we were going to the city and saying, hey, we want you to renovate the library. And we already did our research. There were 5 other libraries that were either built new from the ground up or renovated, $1 million renovations, like 5, 10, 15, and $20 million renovations.
Wow. And
they came back to us. They said, oh, we don't have the money. I said, well, you had the money in every white neighborhood.
Yeah.
But you didn't have the money in the black neighborhood. So after this initial meeting, at the very end of the meeting, I just simply asked one question. I said, when's your next library meeting? The library commission meeting. And like, oh, they meet once a month on it was Wednesday, I think. And I said, thank you very much. And unbeknownst to them, what I did was the next Sunday, I got up in the pulpit and I shared with the congregation, what had happened. And I said, there's a library commission meeting coming up on said date. We'd love it if you would show up to express the importance of a library in the community. Now, one must understand that library commission meetings, nobody goes to unless you're into the Dewey Decimal System. No one goes to a library commission meeting. So on this library commission meeting, which are perfunctory, they're boring, they go on for all of about 50 minutes and they go away. They said, hey, we're going to hire another librarian or something. And this library commission meeting, all of these Black people show up from the community. I mean, and everybody has the same question. I wasn't at the meeting. They're asking us, so you built 5 of the libraries, but you don't have the money for the Carter G. Woodson. Please let that name sit. Named after one of the greatest historian intellectuals. The reason that we have Black History Month, a Black History Week that was started by Carter G. Woodson, the miseducation of the Negro, Carter G. Woodson. And so the meeting ended at let's say 7:59, I think it was. I got a call at 8:01.
Wow.
And they're saying, can we meet, as soon as possible? I was like, sure, I'd be more than happy to meet with you. And so our team met with the library commission and they walk in, they were smiling and they said, we want you to know we found $10 million. We got a $10 million grant.
That was quick.
Wasn't that really quick? To rebuild the library, to renovate the library. I was like, oh, that's really wonderful. So I want you to know that all of your concerns have been taken care of. We said, no. I said, first of all, will Black people benefit from it? Who will be the contractors? Second thing is, will it be a green design? Third, will you use brothers and sisters from the mass incarceration system to do the work? And they looked dumbfounded and said, well, there's no policy to do that. We've never done anything like that before. That would cost a lot. That would increase, they're just using cost as an issue. Yeah. And so we just said back to them, they said, our church did it. Said, if a church that doesn't have the budget of a city, cities have billions of dollars, is able to do this, why can't the city? Long story short, they ended up using the same principles that we used. And I would invite anyone who comes to Chicago to see this crown jewel library now. The Carter Woodson Library is astonishing. It is one of the only libraries in the city of Chicago that specializes in Alzheimer's and dementia. So if you're a caregiver, you can go to this library. Wow. They have a studio in this library. They have an amazing children's section in this library. There is an auditorium in this library. You can have shows in this library. It is truly a crown jewel. And on top of that, you have the largest collection of African American literature in the Midwest and smack dab in the heart of the South Side in the community. And that's part of the kind of development. When I say community development, is making sure that there is an institution that everyone can utilize. And the library is one of those spaces that nobody argues about. You don't have, well, down in Florida, they're arguing about what's in the library. Yeah. Story. But usually libraries are the one community space that just about everybody can agree on, that we want to make sure that it's functioning well.
Wow. That's, I mean, just transformative in so many ways. And just to know that you all held your ground. I mean, there was a lot of wisdom in that negotiation process, how we call it, but just showing the importance of community as well. I mean, you touched on sustainability. How has that played out both in the library and then what you all are doing just in the community in general?
Oh, it's been awesome. So the next phase for the Community Development Corporation, they started purchasing homes in the neighborhood that were on the what you would call the part of the Cook County Land Bank. They tax delinquent homes.
Mm-hmm.
You may get a home for $10,000. I mean, they're falling apart. $10,000, $15,000. And we had a developer who was part of the church, and he wanted to develop the homes so that they would look like they did in the suburbs. High end development. But we would not sell them at anywhere at the cost that they would valued at. And there was a reason. So let's say with the renovation, we get a home, $5, $10, $15, $30,000, whatever it may be. And after everything is done, it's valued at, say, $175. We sell it at $110, $105, or $95. Why? Because you walk in with equity. So the moment you buy your home, you walk in with equity, and all of the kind of internal appointments of the home, the kitchen, the lighting, the whole nine, the way that the heating and air and cooling system is done would be on the same level if you drove to one of the well-off suburbs. So using the same framing. So when the downturn happens, you've got equity in your home. And if you need, because one of the ways that Black people make money in terms of wealth, passive wealth, is we've really done that, through home ownership. So you've already walking in, you've got $25,000, $75,000 worth of equity. That's only going to increase in 15, 20 years. Then you pass it on to your children, and it does not become a burden. It becomes an asset. So we're talking about, the idea of wealth building. So we start purchasing these homes, and then something else happened, which we're dealing with now. Then speculators, these companies, saw what we were doing, and they started grabbing the homes on the tax delinquent rolls in the land bank.
Oh my goodness!
And then trying to sell them without not even close to any kind of relief. I mean, they're still falling apart. Trying to sell them at a higher price, or trying to sell them to us. Oh yeah, we'll give it to you for $80,000. I was like, what are you talking about? This thing was on the rolls for 10. It's not livable. You can't live in this home. It's falling apart. And so we see how capitalism ends up trying to undermine our community when these speculators come in and are basically just trying to, make a buck. And we found out that all these companies, all these individuals, not a single one of them lives in the city of Chicago.
Wow. That was one of the questions I was going to ask. I was going to ask about pushback, but this is, that's a whole nother level of just.
It's another
trying to.
Another kind of fight. Here we're doing community rebuilding. We're doing what we're supposed to do. We're doing the work. And then you have people literally outside of the community say, I'm just going to make a profit of this working class, this middle class community in Chicago, because there's not going to be anybody that's going to be a thicket for them. They got another thing coming, but we still.
Yeah. How do you maintain your hope and your ability to not be jaded? Because I'm hearing you say this for the first time, and all sorts of reactions are coming up inside me. I'm just imagining how you navigate that as a leader, and how you keep people encouraged in the midst of that.
I know this sounds funny, but I'm not trying to be funny, but I'm Black. It's not true. Because I'm a lover of history, and I'm a history nerd. I'm a Black history nerd. I'm just a nerd in general, but especially history nerd, and
it's a good thing.
when I read, it is nothing wrong. Nerds rule the world in that way. Right now. But when I read stories of Harriet Tubman, of Freddie, of Robert Smalls, of Ida, I don't have the right. Could you imagine Harriet Tubman saying, I'm feeling kind of jaded. I only got 300 out. Like you know what you just did. You were not only a spy, but you're going back and you're pulling these out of misery and emancipating them spiritually. I always think that our ancestors are saying to us, Otis, you have all these resources and communities that you can connect with and people. You have what your ancestors never had. And you don't have the right to be cynical. You have the right. You can get mad. You're the right. You can get ticked off. And you can say the system is rigged. But you don't, all that, the being Black is an act of hope. Being Black is an act of resistance. Being Black in this country means that you are from the descendants of people who refused to give in to despair and said, I shall rise up again. And that's one of the beautiful things about the Black church. The Black church is not the white church and, blackface. We have our own theology. We have a theology that speaks about, I don't know, when, but I know it shall. That we have this. It might not come when you want them, but these were these acts of resistance. We always place it in this kind of ephemeral frame of Black people, just some type of opioid or something of that nature for the masses, borrowing from this this Marxian idea. But in the reality, we were in the midst of absurdity and tragedy. We were creating the scaffolding for hope. And that hope was not something that was out there. The hope was that I am a child of God, that the hope was that I have the ability. That's what Frederick Douglass did. He said this was the most articulate orator in the history of America who never went to school. Because he recognized there was one simple kernel that Howard Thurman says. He said, the moment that enslaved Black people recognized that they were loved, and they were loved by something greater than what was before them, then resistance, resilience, and revolution was always a part of their spirit.
So well said. I mean, just that perspective. I appreciate you just highlighting that in so many ways. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's just something that we need to talk about more and more and more, because it's not, we don't all have the Carter G. Woodson library. Unfortunately, that needs to be replicated. That's
right. Everybody needs a Woodson library. Really, every community does. It's a great library.
Yeah. I mean, have there been conversations? I know you all are focused on, the work in the Southside Chicago, but conversations on ways to expand this to other areas or help replicate? I mean, just with colleagues that you have in other locations.
Yeah. We've been even talking about, maybe the possibility of doing a conference, because it's not just the Woodson Library and what we do. We have 27 acres that we purchased, and we are developing that, and that will already has a medical center on the property. We're now doing the housing next. It will eventually have an urban farm, a 5-acre farm, and it'll have a hotel that we're trying to do using the same 3 principles. Again, Black folk got to benefit, got to be sustainable, and those who got to disrupt the mass incarceration system. Those 3 principles always have to be used in the development. And we're going to have a healing garden in partnership with Nature Conservancy. And so it'll be over the next 10, 15, it's going to take a while to finish it. But we've got phase 1, which was and we're not talking about a free clinic. We're talking about primary care, medical facility. And get this always trips people out. It's run by Black women. It's four brilliant, and I say it again, brilliant doctors who run this facility, and the facility is through the largest healthcare provider in Illinois, Advocate Healthcare.
Wow.
And so we developed the land. They partnered with us and built the facility, and it's a state-of-the-art medical center, again, in the heart of the South Side. It's not, there's nothing wrong with the free clinics. I'm not throwing shade there, but many times when we think about our community, we're thinking about something that is a federally subsidized clinic that is not doing primary care, but it's also doing, care for people obviously who don't have access. But this is also practicing preventive care. So they send out nurses into the community to let them know, hey, can I come by your Big Wiz meeting and let me show you signs for a stroke. Because most of the time we end up going into the emergency room for our health care instead of doing the preventive work. So the medical center is working on preventive care, which is really exciting. So we're trying to create a model. What's the model from cradle to the grave? If you want to create a community, what do you need to do? And church is kind of the heart. The library is another anchor right in our community, which is right down the street. And then a mile down, you have this 27 acres that is next door to Chicago State University. It's become a predominantly African-American college. So we got a college, a community, a church, and the Carter G. Woodson Library, all within a 2.5 mile radius. And now this main artery known as 95th Street, we want to develop that whole street, and not as gentrifying, but as Renaissance. And we want to be able to create a model to say to everyone, this is what you can do in your neighborhood. This is what you can do in your community. This is how you build community so that children thrive, so people are not getting shot. This is the long-term, hardcore work that you have to do.
Wow, that's just amazing to hear about, encouraging to hear about. I'm having a little juxtaposition in my mind. So just to give you a little bit of insight, earlier, I guess a couple months ago, I was actually out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I don't know if you know, but they opened a new museum out there on the 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre.
Yes.
So to think about everything that happened there with Black Wall Street, everything that changed, and to put that in juxtaposition with everything you all are doing, it's just, I don't even know if I can put it into words, but just holding those two together.
We're history nerds here. So that's, Tulsa is a model, but Auburn Avenue, the history of Auburn Avenue in Atlanta is, there are these streets everywhere in the Black community that thrive. If you go to New Orleans, if you were to go to Jackson, if you went to Memphis, every street, they were like this 5-block stretch, minimum 5 blocks of, I'm not talking about, tiny little stores. I'm talking about like thriving businesses, attorneys, doctors, restaurants, dry cleaners, every kind of business you could kind of think of. In some places, like in Tulsa, they had hotels. It was amazing. Same thing with on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta. It had this history. But we want to replicate that.
Yeah,
that there was a model that worked. There was the model that worked, and when you build these institutions and you create the space that allow people to thrive, and we find out that home ownership plus jobs plus churches that are engaged reduces violence dramatically. Then add gardens to the to the table, plus libraries and schools. The trend goes down even farther. And so that's what we're trying to do. And then it's not rocket science. If you want to change stuff, we've been doing it for a long time. We know how to do it. We just need to have the moral courage to be able to move forward.
Yeah. So well said. Just inspiring. I know for a lot of our listeners, especially as we've been hinting at the fact that this history is not readily taught. Many people might be hearing aspects of this for the first time, which I think is also an important and a huge step. Obviously, you all have done wonderful job of that already in your community, but as much as this can be modeled and expanded, I think is so important. So again, it's just really encouraging to hear about all that you're doing in the midst of everything, even as you opened up this conversation, in the midst of everything you're even experiencing in your pastoral role day to day. So, I mean, to me, it's just deeply encouraging to know what you all are about. Makes me want to swing by at some point just to get even a firsthand glimpse or get connected with some of those doctors, those Black women who are running things and doing so brilliantly. It's just, yeah, I'm speechless, but I'm talking a lot. It's a mixture of the combination of both coming out at once. But any last words that you want to leave our listeners with in terms of either a word of encouragement or a word of challenge?
I would say that you are birthed and born with the power of resilience and resistance. It just needs to be nurtured. Find spaces, find people who will pour into you. And when they pour into you, make sure you pour into somebody else. There's nothing more dangerous than a person who acts like a swamp instead of acting like a canal. Swamps have inlets, but no outlet. And that's why swamps smell and things die. But canals are designed to release for those who are in need. And so be a canal when someone pours into you. That's all we're called to do. Just don't be a swamp. That's what America wants you to be.
Amen to that. Well, again, Dr. Moss, just appreciate you taking the time just for everything that you shared, all the work that you all are doing in community together. So grateful and honored to be able to host you here today. Thank you again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And we look forward to seeing you in Chicago sometime.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.